if you walked outside those big doors and you surveyed, let's say, I don't know, 1,000 high schoolers, and you asked them to name, the president, vice president, and let's say Speaker of the House, I bet you good money that maybe 70, 80, maybe even 90% of them could do that. But if you went and asked those same kids to name just one person on their school board or city council, I think you'd be lucky to get, maybe 5 in 100, right? That's a problem, because local politics and local government is just as important and relevant to high schoolers and people in general as national stories are, right? We saw this especially last year through the pandemic, when school boards were literally deciding whether or not we'd be stepping back in classrooms, right? There's a sort of proximity that local government has that national politics don't, right? So why is this a problem? I think the easy answer is to go, well, okay, local politics just isn't as sexy as national stuff, right? And that's partially true. If you try to sit through a school board meeting or a city council meeting, I mean, that's some of the most boring stuff that you could possibly subject yourself to, right? But then I think you have to ask yourself, well, is there anything more inherently interesting about national politics? And I think not, right? If you've ever tried to sit through a Senate budget hearing or oral arguments in a Supreme Court case, I mean, there's nothing sexy about government at any level, and it's all boring. And if you think otherwise, then I can't help you. But look, the reason why we find national stories more interesting is because the outlets that cover them, right, the New York Times, the Washington Post, the Wall Street Journal, they have the resources to be really digitally savvy, right? They've got these beautiful websites with these stunning photos, and they've got these beautiful Instagram feeds, and they've got explainer videos on their YouTube channels, they've got Snapchat, they've got Twitter, they've got everything that a modern consumer could possibly want, right? And this is not to say that local journalists aren't doing great work, because they are, right? But a lot of local papers are struggling just to survive in the first place, right? And targeting high schoolers is not an objective, right? Because high schoolers aren't subscribing, high schoolers aren't donating, and none of the existing advertisers want to put stuff in front of high schoolers, right? So we have the problem. We have one of the reasons why this is the problem. Now the question is, what's the solution, right? I think it's student journalism. Now, student journalism often gets really bad rep, and it's partially deserved, right? If you open any campus newspaper, you're going to find typos on the front page, you're going to find horrible writing, you're going to find bad journalism, right? And this is not, especially in a place like this is not because of a lack of resources or funding or a lack of great teachers or some kind of intellectual shortcoming within the student population. This is because not enough kids are interested in journalism, right? In any given campus with, let's say, 2,000 kids, you're only going to have a handful of kids who are interested in taking any part, having anything to do with student journalism, right? And how could you possibly run a newspaper with just that handful of kids? Meet the Midpeninsula Post. We are an independent student newsroom. Independent being key here. We're not tied to school, which means we can take kids from any campus that we want, right? So right now we've got a staff of 12 from 4 high schools and actually one middle school. And the idea is that we're gathering some of the most talented and motivated student journalists from schools across the region, right? Our applicant pool is effectively quadruple the size of what a campus newspaper might be, right? And the idea is you get all these kids in one place, and you get them where they can push each other and deliver a real and reliable product, right? And our whole thing is we're kind of serving the unserved niche of high schoolers who aren't getting targeted with local news, and by extension, we're trying to get them engaged in their communities, right? So today I'm going to tell you a bit about kind of who we are, what we do, what we're about, and then I'm going to tell you about the kind of 3 biggest challenges that we have to face in running a newspaper, because there are a lot of them, but the three biggest ones, right? So first, what do we do? What does it mean to actually target high schoolers with local journalism, right? Part of this has to do with how do you write stuff, right? So where a local paper might kind of gloss over something about housing code or something about the budget and some kind of educational bill, right? We're going to take more time to explain what's actually going on, right? But the bigger thing has to do with our digital front. We recognize that most high schoolers are not going to take the time to open up, a weekly newspaper, the big broadsheet. You got to open up the pages, and it's not intuitive, right? And nobody's even going to take the time to open up a website every day. But we thought, okay, well, where are high schoolers every day, and where can we put the stuff? And that's on Instagram, actually. And so I'm going to show you a bit about what we do. But first, this is what most student papers and most professional papers do, actually. So this is an article I wrote for the Talon, which is our campus newspaper here, back when I used to work for them. So we've got a not very pretty photo that's not very shareable, as our cover slide. We've got a caption that's not very well written, but basically you just copy paste the first paragraph of your article, and you say, okay, go to our link in the link in the bio to read the story, right? Because you can't link in Instagram captions. I've seen the analytics. nobody is clicking on the link in the bio to go read the story. That is a barrier to access that nobody is getting through, right? So here's what we do at the Post. We've got this very beautiful photo, and if you want to pull out your phone and follow along at the Midpen Post down there, I won't be offended if you pull your phone out. Actually, I would appreciate it because we get more views. But anyways, we got this beautiful photo, which is taken by Emily Yao. She's a senior at Pally. We've got this kind of big, bold headline. The idea is this is a very shareable image, right? Next slide. So the web article is like a 1,500-word article. It's a pretty standard news article. But we're saying, okay, this is the condensed story. This is kind of the gist of what you need, right? So we kind of copy-pasted the first sentence. We changed some words. Next slide, we've got a sort of big quote, more summary. Another quote. We've got these kind of bullet points, big ideas. The idea is we're kind of breaking up information so that it can be consumed on Instagram, right? You don't have to go to the web, right? And I think at the start we were going, well, are we kind of wasting all the good work we're doing on web, right? Like if you condense a 1,500-word article to fit on 10 slides on Instagram, like yeah, you're missing out on some journalism, but I think it's not so much the question of like how do we drive web traffic. I think it's realizing that trying to get people to our website is a bit of a lost cause, especially for our audience. So it's like, okay, let's get this on Instagram. It's still linked, on our website, and you can still go there. But it's let's get what we can in front of our audience, right? So I could talk about any number of things that we do to target high schoolers specifically, but that's the sort of gist of it, right? Now, this all sounds really great, right? We're doing student journalism, we're going to save the world, whatever, right? But there are some really big problems that you've got to face when you're running an organization with a bunch of high schoolers, right? Number one, how do you convince a community that it's worth listening to a bunch of 17-year-olds with an internet connection, right? This is a tough one, right? And there are a lot of very specific kind of niche journalism things I could talk about, but what this really comes down to is you have to care. Right? You have to care about the little details, right? For instance, on those Instagram slides that I just showed you, it's a real pain to build those things, especially after spending hours, writing and reporting and writing your web articles. Like, oh my God, now I've got to do this thing for Instagram, right? But you have to care and you have to be willing to put in that work. It's little stuff too, right? It's when you're walking into an interview with a superintendent or a school board member, how are you dressed? Is your handshake firm? What kinds of intelligent questions are you asking, right? It's also about little details. And my team will often roll their eyes when I talk about this because I'm saying this on repeat. But so every meeting, I'll do a little grammar lesson, and it's about really stupid stuff. It's like the pronouns need to match their antecedents and number, and like when do you capitalize letters after a colon, right? It's really nitpicky stuff in my team. Their eyes glaze over and they go, why the heck are we doing this? This is a waste of time. And the answer is, the moment you stop caring about things is the moment you start sliding downward and you start being not credible at all, right? If you can't take the time to work out these little details, why should anybody read your stuff, right? The way that you set yourself apart is by paying attention to detail and putting in that work, right? Problem two. Oh, I forgot to show this photo, but this is our team. That's Carly and that's Melody and that's Natalie down there. Two, motivation. How do you convince a bunch of high schoolers that it's worth putting in that work in the absence of grades? Now, this is a struggle, and this might be the biggest struggle that we faced, right? It all starts with the application process. First test. If I get any sense that somebody's applying, just to slap something on their college app or their resume, it's, sorry, don't want you, right? A resume builder is never going to be a good teammate, right? Beyond that, it really becomes like building a sports team. And my team is going to hate me for this analogy because they're all dorks. But like it really is. Okay, what kinds of holes are we looking to fill in our team, right? Okay, what does a roster look like next year? Maybe this person is really great technically, but we actually don't think they're going to fit in with our team, in terms of chemistry, and we don't think their values align with ours, right? And once you get all those people in the same room, now it becomes a matter. It's just about, are you leading by example? Are you setting goals, and are you setting clear, actionable steps to get there? And that kind of takes care of itself once you get really good people in the room, right? And it's also important to recognize that as much as we like to take ourselves seriously and we like to pretend that we're really professional, I think a lot of people join high school organizations and they stay in them for the kind of fun stuff, right? The fun and stupid stuff, right? And the problem is, we founded the Post just over a year ago. It's like, how do you create community and tradition in the absence of time, right? How can you possibly have inside jokes and little stupid things you do, when you're just starting an organization, right? And the answer is, you kind of have to let this stuff happen, but you can also help it along. So, for example, one day I decided that I would bring bananagrams. If you haven't played it, it's kind of like Scrabble, but for younger people. But it's still kind of like a little nerdy. But anyway, it's like a word game, and we played at the end of a meeting, and like we got really competitive, and we're like flipping over tables, and we're screaming, and we're cursing, and like it's just kind of a fun thing that we do, and it's like it's a very sort of stupid thing. Maybe even stupider is this, Grybert the rubber duck. He's a little rubber duck. Every month, the MVP of the Midpen Post gets awarded Grybert. And if you get Grybert, you get to add something to him. So right now, he's painted blue. He's got a necktie. He's got geese. He's got a crown. I think he even has like a monocle right now, too. And so you get Grybert, you get to add something, and you get to go to his Instagram account, and you get to post him. It's just kind of a fun, silly thing. And I think that's the kind of stuff that keeps people around, right? Challenge number 3. This is the last and final challenge, and this is the one that I can't confidently say that we've solved, right? How do you set up an organization that's going to succeed far into the future, right? This is, I'm going to graduate in a couple months. I don't know, but there are very specific actionable things we've done. Number 1, historically we've benefited from being able to draw kids from journalism programs kind of at different schools, right? And that's not a very sustainable model, right? So a while ago, we decided to run a journalism course for middle schoolers. That was cool. We actually got a couple staff members from there. We wanted to do something similar with high schoolers, but we couldn't get enough interest. I think not enough high schoolers are interested in being taught by other high schoolers, surprisingly. So we're looking to fill like a sort of more development editor role who would specifically be in charge of bringing up new journalists, right? We also recognize that we are high schoolers and we do not know nearly everything that there is to know about journalism, right? So we've got an advisory board of professional journalists. These are journalists from the SF Chronicle, the Mercury News, NBC Bay Area, Palo Alto Weekly, and the Town Crier, who've all just very graciously agreed to give us, sort of informal advice. And that really helps. And there are any number of specific sort of actionable, tangible things we can talk about. But I think a lot of what this comes down to is a more sort of philosophical thing. And that's that I think the biggest downfall of student organizations, but organizations in general, is that leaders and people, they come in and that they inherit a kind of a system and a setup and a structure and a way of doing things, and they say, okay, we're going to leave it like it is. We're not going to change anything, right? And if somebody dares adjust and say, hey, maybe we could actually be doing this a little better, they say, no, right? We've always done it this way. This is how we're going to do it. And that's stupid, right? That's how you stagnate, and that's how you get left behind in the dust by everybody, right? And this is the point that we are driving home at every meeting. And it's like, you need to be asking questions, and you need to be challenging things, right? We wouldn't have started the Post if we didn't see something and sort of challenge an existing way of doing things, right? And that's a lot of what it comes down to. You know what? Frankly, I'm a little bit terrified about what's going to happen to the Post once I graduate. Like, I'm oftentimes kept up at night thinking about that's a Nana. She's a junior at Mountain View. She's our next year's editor-in-chief. Thinking like, oh my God, what is Nana going to do with the Post? Like, what is she going to change? What if she changed everything? But in a way, that's good, right? Because if I thought that Nana was just going to leave everything the way it is, that would actually be bad, because we'd just be stagnating, right? So look, I think it would be silly to pretend as if this is some sort of like big catch-all solution for problems that plague local journalism nationally. Right? We have been able to benefit from the sort of extreme resources of the schools that we're drawing kids from, and we're doing this in a bubble. This is not something that you could just copy-paste everywhere, right? But I still really do believe that there is something to student journalism. I think when student journalists are put under the right circumstances, they can do work that is on par with professionals, right? But I actually don't want your biggest takeaway from today to be about journalism. Because my biggest takeaway from the Post hasn't anything to do with the writing or the photography or the whatever. And it's been this. Just because you are 14, 15, 16, 17 does not mean that you just have to accept the world the way it is, right? It doesn't mean that you don't have the right to challenge things and existing ways of doing things just because you think nobody's going to take you seriously, right? You can literally change the world, right? And that doesn't mean being like Greta and solving climate change or whatever, but it means starting small, right? You start small and you go, okay, what's something in my community that I can change, and how can I use my unique skill set to address that, right? And if you do that, and if you put in, earnest and hard work, I really do think that you can make a difference, and I think that's pretty awesome. Thank you.